If I were to advise you to do one thing, I would say run to see Run because it's a fantastic suspense thriller. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. Folks, I am really glad to have with me today Aneesh Chaganty, the co-writer director, and Sev Ohanian, the co-writer producer of Run. You could watch Run on Hulu. It came out towards the end of 2020 and it is just a fantastically written and fantastically directed piece. And it's an intimate suspense thriller. There's so much to talk about. This became such a cool episode because, you know, as some of you I hopefully know by now, during the pandemic, I have been doing these interviews since the screening series is temporarily shut down. Obviously, we've been doing these as Zoom calls, right? And so, yes, I've been taking the audio and putting it into iTunes and Spotify as podcasts, but we've also been taking the video of these Zoom calls and putting them onto the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. Well, what's interesting about that is that today Sev was just so well organized since we were sitting at our computers having the Zoom call. In the middle of it, he's just like, oh, you know, do you want to see what that outline page looks like? Or do you want to see what this animatic looked like? And he would just call it up on his computer. And so, you know, I gave him screen sharing rights. So he was able to take over the screen. And it was like a real treat. And it was really cool because it was not planned at all. But man, Sev knows what is on his computer and where it is, because I wouldn't be able to find stuff like that if I needed to so fast. So he is quite an organized kid for sure. And I think you definitely want to take a look at the YouTube video for sure, so that you could see it, so you could take a look at their outlines, take a look at some of the questions they have from, you know, asking friends when they're getting notes and see their animatics and stuff like that. And, you know, if you're doing something physical, like maybe you're going for a walk and you're listening to the podcast, maybe just take a note or a screenshot to see where you are in the podcast. You could then line up that time code later and easily find it in the YouTube version. And then you could see it that way too. So if you don't want to be on your computer the whole time, that would work as well. But, you know, there's so many great things to talk about. And they were really cool about going over our time limit to just get it all in there because they really wanted to talk about their craft and what it took to make Run. So you're definitely going to dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, you know, Final Draft is the sponsor of today's episode, and they have just launched a 60-day trial of Final Draft 11. So this new trial gives you a chance to check out every single feature of the industry standard screenwriting software that's used by Oscar-winning writers like Guillermo del Toro, Sofia Coppola, Aaron Sorkin, and so many more. And you're able to do this test drive of Final Draft 11 for absolutely free for 60 days. And you could do so by just going to trial.finaldraft.com. And, you know, while you're there, if after your 60 days, you decide you like Final Draft, which I'm sure you will, and you want to purchase it, I've got a code for you that you could use to purchase it and save 20% off your purchase at finaldraft.com. And the code is QAPOD21. That's the letter Q, the letter A, pod 21. And that'll save you 20% off of your purchase of Final Draft. So look, it's a great piece of writing software. We even talk about one of the features later on, before I even knew that Final Draft was going to become the sponsor for this episode, that I really like, called Beatbox, which you should check out because we were talking a lot about carding, and it's an interesting feature that they have for carding. But yeah, definitely visit Final Draft, our sponsors, and take a test drive. See what you could get done in 60 days with some screenwriting, and then come back and buy it and finish your screenplay, unless you're able to finish it in 60 days, which is kind of amazing. And, you know, while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. We recently published issue 42, our new issue, and I'm very proud of it. There's so many cool things in that issue. We have original screenplays that have never been seen by anyone because they're unproduced, by Simon Kinberg with the first screenplay that he ever sold, and an interview about it. We also have director Joe Carnahan for LA 58, the screenplay that him and his brother Matthew Michael Carnahan wrote, and that's actually really cool. And we have the whole script in there for you to read. We publish a Blacklist screenplay every issue, and we have tons of interviews with writers and directors, comic book artists, and TV show runners. So there's a ton of stuff for you to read in issue 42. If you've never read us, just like with our final draft deal, you could test drive us. You could read the free issue of Backstory magazine via the Backstory app on an iPad or at backstory.net. And you could read us on a desktop or laptop. It's issue 37. You'll see the free issue there. You could test drive us, see what's in it. And if you like it, you could save $5 off a subscription by using coupon code SAVE5. That's save and the number 5 over at backstory.net. And your login credentials will work on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app. So it's a great way to read us as well. So there's a lot for you to see, and you can see our entire table of contents of what's inside issue 42 over at backstory.net as well. So thanks for considering supporting my passion project. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our massive podcast for Run, which you could see on Hulu. I highly recommend you check it out because it's just awesome to watch. And let's talk to Aneesh and Sev about co-writing Run. Aneesh, Sev, it's great to have you guys. How's it going?
Hey, good to be here.
It's going well. I have a massive migraine, so if any of you guys are looking on video and I just start rubbing my temples, it's not because I'm annoyed here.
Oh, good. It's not my questions.
It's not you.
Okay, good. That's good. Well, so, I guess it's always good to start with breaking in stories and give people a baseline for you guys. To my knowledge, you guys met at University of Southern California's film school. I went to SC as well, a little bit before you kids, but tell us about going to film school and what you gleaned from it.
I'll start. Okay, cool. We met at USC Film School. I was there as a grad student when I met Aneesh. And for me, it was... there was a period of discovery that I think a lot of people have who ultimately go to film school, which is just even realizing that that is a field of education that you can even get a degree in, let alone get paid to do one day.
Yeah.
For me, I remember when I was an undergrad, I did a lot of research online at what are the best film schools to go to? And, everything that I saw online was really indicating to me that it was USC. And I know, I guess it wins a lot of top film school in America, yearly awards or whatever. But, I remember I visited the campus. I was so stunned that there's a building named after George Lucas. There's a building named after Steven Spielberg. That just was insane to me. And I got to kind of sneak into a couple of classes. I met a couple of students. I knew I had to get there. And when I got to USC, it kind of felt a little bit like probably going to Hogwarts. For somebody who had grown up loving film my whole life. And I got to immediately, I think I was most impressed by the fact that in my incoming semester, there was 48 students, and literally all of us were from different corners of the world. People, I was in LA, I'm an LA native, but so many people were from Ohio and New York and Korea. And it was incredible just suddenly working with people. And I think there was also something daunting about the fact that, I guess a lot of us were probably arguably the top filmmakers in our, respective high schools or colleges or whatever. And now suddenly we were among a group of other top filmmakers. So the competition was immediately on. And ultimately the end result for me was a place that I could learn from great professors and meet amazing fellow colleagues and, people who like Aneesh and so many others that I still work with every single day. So for me, it was a net positive through and through.
Aneesh?
Yeah. Wow. The advertisement.
Dean Daly's going to be taking that clip.
Yeah. I won't repeat. All those are positives. I think, the most important thing any film school kind of more than its education is the kind of what Seth was suggesting is, the people that it puts you around with. That's I think the one thing that can separate any film school from the next is not everybody knows that the principles of filmmaking are the same in Ohio or to LA, but it's who you learn with sometimes that kind of makes the difference. And in our case, in my case, I guess, it was absolutely that allows us to make that next small level up to the next level up is the people that you work with or study with, because the people that you study with at USC, your semester, the semester before you, after you, whatever, those are the writers, those are producers, those are executives, those are and they'll start off assistants, but they'll, in 20 years, one of them is a studio head, so those are the, to kind of create very ground up relationships with these people, not even film based, just going out with them and being friends with them. And those are the sort of foundations that I think have allowed Sev in my example is the most extreme, I think, of like how one relationship can kind of go furthest in its positive way, but just also like the number of people we interact with who went to USC with plus minus 2 years from both of us is pretty high on a daily basis in many different kind of fields of Hollywood. So it was an absolutely positive thing as far as like being helpful in a larger career.
Aneesh, were you also in grad student or were you undergrad?
I was an undergrad student. Sev was a grad student. So the way Sev and I met was he was a TA in one of the undergraduate production classes.
Okay, because I was going to say they kind of keep them separate, unfortunately, a lot, and there is kind of a separation between the two. Sometimes the grads look
grad students. I don't think the grad students would want to be paired with the undergrads. They think they're way cooler than we are.
But you know what's crazy, man? Like I very actively and deliberately became a TA in undergrad classes because I guess I was on the younger end of grad students when I got to USC. I think I was 21 when I started. I remember like having such a more of an affinity for the undergrads. I felt like you guys were just hungrier and more willing to be ambitious and like, oh man, we're going to spend 14 hours this weekend working on this. Like I'm down. I think some of the grad students, at least in my particular like bubble, were not always as down for that kind of stuff. So I was like, you know what? I want to hang out with I want to hang out with the cool kids. So that's ended up being like, that guy that comes back to high school 4 years later and acts like it's really cool.
You're Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused.
Yeah. No, that's great.
I was that guy. I was like, hello, fellow undergrads when I was taking for Aneesh's class. But yes, exactly.
My fellow youth. Yeah.
So, tell us about your exposure to learning screenwriting as something to study, storytelling, because how familiar were you with the basics of screenwriting before you got into film school?
I and Sev too, actually, like, as a filmmaker growing up, you write everything that you make, and you make most of the things that you write. You don't have a network of people, so like you are writing, and so I think for me, that recipe for success, even if it wasn't like, I don't know, even if the movies that I was making when I was a kid weren't good, or actually that's a fact, they aren't good, but like they were still really well received in the bubbles that I was making them. So it was always like, oh yeah, I know how to write, like even though I didn't know how to write, like, you could feel that at the level that you were competing with, you were pretty good. So I kind of went in to USC, kind of wanting to focus on both things. And I think one of my observations has been like, especially at film school, like I think when I was there, my observation was that like there were two types of people who wanted to be directors. There were the directors who really focused on like the visuals and making like things look amazing and crazy new and all that stuff. And then there was the directors that really wrote or focused on like the story. And I always my bet at the time was that like, I'm going to focus on be the latter because I'm sure I can surround myself with people who can make that the other happen, the former happen. And so like I took a lot of screenwriting classes, and the whole time my most important one was like story structure, the story structure class that I took, which was a mix of grad students and undergrad students. But that was I was always kind of doing that to help my directing, but it was from the beginning, I kind of wanted to focus on that.
Sev, screenwriting for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was primarily a producing student. Like most of the classes I took were in that world, but the screenwriting classes that I did take, I remember there was a professor named Don Bollinger, who I believe is still teaching to this day, who blew my mind when it came to story structure. And it was one of like those, classic, classes where we would watch a movie and then talk about what's the act one, what's act two, inciting incident. It's funny. I remember he introduced me to Breaking Bad when it was still in it had just completed its first season. He brought in Vince Gilligan, who we were like, who's this guy? And he's like, I'm going to screen for you guys episode 1 of Breaking Bad. Then we're going to screen episode 6 of Breaking Bad, which is, I think, the season 1 finale. Then we're going to have a 2-hour discussion with Vince Gilligan.
Wow.
And we were like, all right, cool. Like this AMC show, whatever. We watched the pilot. Then, the lights went on for like 2 minutes while they were loading the 6th episode. And myself and about 50 other students just left the class. Because I'm like, I don't want to watch episode 6. I want to go home and watch episode 2. And it was great. I never got to hear what Vince had to say, unfortunately.
You didn't come back for the Q&A?
No way. I don't want to get
Oh
spoiled.
my
Are you
God.
kidding me? He becomes a freaking drug
Yeah,
dealer.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy. And I remember in that class, like, I just think the fact that Don was incredible and that he was able to see, all right, this is incredible writing, kind of at the time when nobody was even really acknowledging Breaking Bad. But just like what Aneesh was saying, like, it really opened my mind to that there is a real craft to screenwriting. It's not just this artistic thing that you just, think of something and put it on paper with the magic of the pen. It's really about like working and putting the craft into it and figuring out, all the problem solving that comes with telling a story. So, I mean, to me, I know I'm a walking, talking USC advertisement, but it really was eye opening, and it kind of, it led me into the right direction for even further discovery.
A few more things just before we get to Run, which I promise you we're going to do. I know that the 2014 short film Seeds got you guys, over 1 million YouTube views. Aneesh, you directed it. Sev, you produced it, and you shot it on Google Glass. And one of the interesting questions I have is, like, do you still have your Google Glass? Like, does it still work even though they distanced and decommissioned themselves? Because I'm surprised we don't see more things that are Google Glass kind of experiments.
That's a good question. Mine is underneath my bed in my parents' home, so I should go dig it out one of these days.
Wow, yeah, I had to give it back to Sev, so that's probably
okay.
Oh, no,
So you don't even know if it still works.
I'll let you know next week when I go home. I'm really curious.
Right. Well, so, what was your biggest lesson on that? Because, I mean, obviously it was YouTube that really got you the attention, and that kind of broke you guys and got you a lot of attention.
Yeah, it's definitely the first domino in my larger career that sort of fell, following graduation from USC, because, even though there were, I think, big jumps coming up, like as far as Sundance goes and searching and all that stuff, like that was the first thing that started the chain, and like, you need a first thing, and so that to me was the biggest lesson that I will walk away with from Seeds with is basically, like, Seeds to me is the perfect story of how anyone trying to break into something, like the mentality that it takes to do it. Because the story of the making of Seeds is basically the story of being constantly told, no, the path that you want to go down is not allowed. And us always being like, we'll find another person who will let us do this, and I think, like, for the entire process of, because Seeds never
give us an example. What was one of the things you were told no on?
Sure, I'll tell the story. I mean, tell the story of Seeds. So basically, like, when I graduated USC, I was just, writing a story writing a film with Sev, and my days were like going to a coffee shop and opening up a laptop, surrounded by other people with laptops on the same screenwriting program, writing scripts, and it was just like, there was nothing there that I felt like that was going to break for us. There was nothing that was happening, in a larger sense, even though the story you're writing was cool. Like, it didn't like open 1,000 doors for our careers. But one day Sev got a call from USC because they had been asked by Google Glass, which was a dying program at the time, but not dead, to give the glass to a bunch of film schools to see if their students or alumni could make something with it to prove that it was a viable filmmaking device, which it's obviously not. But they gave the film, they gave the thing to Sev, and Sev's job as a producer was to produce 3 separate projects using the Google Glass. And at the time, Sev didn't even see me as, or not, I wouldn't say see me, but like Sev and I had never worked together as director and producer. It was always writer and writer. And so, like, Sev kind of went out, tried to get these projects together. And I really wanted it, like, to do one. So I eventually begged him to let me pitch, and he let me pitch, and I got the project. And the way USC works is like, so that's no number one. And I condensed that. That was about 3 weeks of work. So like we got the project, and the way USC likes to work is simulate like a studio structure. So like the script was already written, and it was a death metal music video that I had pitched for and won. So we had a death metal music video. And I remember looking at the script for death metal music video, and the budget was $1,500 for like 2 weeks, and being like, why are we making a death metal music video? Went online to the YouTube channel and found that they had no commercials for Google Glass. And I went to Sev and I was like, yo, we should make them a commercial. There's nothing out there. Like, it would be awesome if we just secretly made them a commercial. And he was like, yeah, totally. I was like, the death metal music video isn't it. And he was like, what is? So I spent 2 or 3 days thinking about just all the resources that I had that nobody else had, like no other filmmaker had. And I realized like, oh, I have a connection to India that nobody else has. And that's production value because you have to pay for that stuff. And we only had $1,500. So I went to Sev and I told him this idea and he loved the story. And we're like, we have to make this. And basically, but we had this other project that was going with the approval of USC, with the not with Google had no idea what was going on. So with the approval of USC, and we were going to go make this thing. And then we had this better idea that we just knew was better. And we were just like, how does one project become the other project? And then conveniently over the course of a few weeks, one project sort of fell apart. One wheel fell off, then like the wagon back fell off, and then like slowly the whole thing collapsed. And everyone's like, well, what do we do now? And then we had this other project that was on the side being like, hey, well, I guess we can quickly make this, for $1,500. And USC was like, sure. Okay, go with that. And I mean, there's so much things I'm not going to, but like, so a couple of weeks later, I was on a flight to USC. We had shot the film basically like with a Google Glass, and USC had made, well, we'd had a script after we had pitched the film as Seeds. There was a couple of changes that were kind of added on to the film that we didn't particularly care about as much, or I didn't particularly care about as much, which was a lot of dialogue in the film. And right when I got to India, I was basically like, oh, this thing the audio is not working. We can't record the dialogue. And so we never recorded the dialogue. And then we came back, shot this thing, put it together, made it into 2.5-minute spot, loved it. We were just like, this is really, really, really good. And showed it around. Everyone liked it except the overlords and who wanted a bunch of changes to it. And we were like, this is really good. 2 weeks later was Mother's Day. And we were like, if this goes out for Mother's Day, it's perfect. But we weren't allowed to because there was a blockage in connection. We did not have a relationship to Google. It was just through USC. And so we were like, let's make that relationship to Google. So suddenly like we found an alternate way to go and get drinks with a girlfriend who was a friend of mine of somebody who worked at Google, had drinks with them, wow. Shared the video. And then it went around back channeled sort of like, and suddenly on the next week, we were getting all these forwards of emails of like, of people at Google Glass who were like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. And they asked us, can we put this on our YouTube channel for Mother's Day? And we were like, hell yeah. And so we basically back channel that went over there. And then, I mean, ultimately we realized like, we were graduates of a film school. We hadn't signed, like, there was nothing that was actually binding us to the thing. We were like, ultimately just trying to get our thing out. And once that went out on the day of, like, it was like initially like fire alarms by everyone being like, what the hell? We never saw this. And then the first interview came in and the interview blew up about the film and people were sharing it and it got 1 million hits. And then suddenly the tone of everything changed. And now they've played that video at freshman orientations.
Yeah, so like, exactly. It was now like, it's used as a marketing tool.
Yeah. Exactly. And the thing is like, I think I'm over time, the longer the distance that I get from graduation, I feel more comfortable sharing more details. There's a lot in there that I didn't share, but it's all a bunch of no's and how to turn a no into a yes. And I think like the idea of like, you have to like, you can stop at it. There were so many points where the project could have been totally different. And like, we would have done the right thing. And it wouldn't have led to this. And I think a lot of ways it's because of those 4 weeks of making this that I have a career, in a lot of ways, because like that is what led to Google. And it was just saying,
no, that's great.
Finding a way to make it happen.
Did you spend your $1,500 basically on your plane ticket to India?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
It was entirely
that's awesome.
Ticket. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, so look, Sev, I know you produced Fruitvale Station, which is huge and led to your relationship with Sundance. There's tons to talk about there, and you're still working with Ryan Coogler. Obviously, I have to touch just for a moment because you guys are so good at suspense thrillers on Searching, your Sundance film, which it's funny. You outlined a way for someone to make a film during a pandemic, in your 2018 release, because it's using screens, it's using computers. You're not actually filming as much on set, although there is stuff, from the footage from the phones and stuff like that, where you're on set and stuff like that. But just briefly, what was your biggest lesson of searching, which really cemented you guys as thriller suspense writers?
I mean, it's interesting when you talk about lesson. And by the way, it is funny about searching, being a movie that we shot, that takes place entirely on screens. If you've seen the movie, it has no shortage of spectacle or scale.
Right.
You're going through entire lifetimes. There's
It's
aerial
excellent.
stuff, wilderness, forest, rescues, all that. And we shot it in 13 days, and
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay, wow.
Oh, totally. And like many of those 13 days involved a single actor in a single room staring at a single webcam. So like I do take pride in the fact that I think we invented the perfect pandemic safe, film. And it's no coincidence that like every industry and studio in town reached out to us over the past couple months asking for searching type material. And what's cool is like Aneesh and I and our fellow producer, Natalie Kasabian, we just watched a cut of Searching 2 like days ago.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So that's real. You guys are doing Searching 2 or somebody else is doing it? You guys did it.
Well, we're producing it, Aneesh, Natalie, and I. It's based on a story treatment that Aneesh and I wrote, and we're going to be announcing who the writer and director is very soon. And it's I guarantee you that announcement's going to be amazing because it's like there's awesome. There's no better filmmaker. But
when would that come out?
To be announcement or the movie?
Okay. That's great. Well, so your biggest lesson, like 13 days. What was your budget for Searching then with those 13 days?
$880,000.
Wow. Okay, great.
That was something we actually had to fight quite hard to bring it up from the initial $500,000 we were asked for. And it was honestly like, it was my first time being a, quote unquote lead producer on a film. It was Aneesh's first film that he was a director of. It was mine and Aneesh's first time writing a feature film. And a lot of the people that we had on the movie actually was their first time composing a feature film, first time shooting a feature film, first time editing a feature film. Like it was very much it was kind of like a Ocean's 11 type situation where we're just bringing together like all of our good friends and trying to do something that hadn't quite been done before. I think so many lessons, I think one of the things with Searching, at least in the writing phase, was that we really tried to come up with the tightest possible script that like spoke to characters, spoke to themes, had no shortage of surprises and twists and turns and all kind of like wrapped in this like compelling, propulsive, momentous thing. And when it was time for us to write Run, and Aneesh will talk about this, I'm sure, like Run in so many ways was definitely a response to Searching. It was something that we developed and started writing even as Searching was being finished. And I remember when Aneesh and I and Natalie were flying to Sundance in January 2018 to premiere Searching, we had printed the first 50 pages of the Run script because that's as far as being written. And each of us were like reading our own writing and doing notes so that when we came back from Sundance, we could finish. But, Run was very much a response to Searching to try and do something that was quite different because it would have been very easy for people to fold us or maybe a niche into a certain box after Searching. And Run was kind of making it clear, like, there's also, we are the innovative filmmakers, but we also do this like traditional thing. I don't know, man. I mean, so much. I mean, Aneesh, what do you think, man? You should jump in.
Something that for all the planning you couldn't have expected. And it was something that, helped your creative habit as you move forward, making your next film.
Since Searching was the first time that we'd ever written a film, I think we really relied on a certain structure to tell it, like very, very, very classic kind of screenwriting structure. And so that was the first time we were really applying it. And I think like it worked really well. And so in a lot of ways, it kind of, dude, it's hard.
I mean, I can talk about one thing, Jeff. This is especially like really specific to screenwriting and like preparing. After when I graduated USC, I was a co-producer on Fruitvale Station, and then I did about like almost a dozen other indie films leading up to Searching. And it was kind of like my trial by fire, getting as much experience as I can on different corners of the industry. How do you raise money? How do you find talent? Blah, blah, blah. And as a junior producer, there were so many times that I would sit in feedback sessions for those films, and we had already edited them and we're screening it to friends. And I remember oftentimes, because I was a junior producer, I was really just kind of in the back of the room taking notes, kind of providing support. And so often I would hear questions being asked and answers being given by people who had just seen these early cuts of these films, in which the advice that they were giving were things we couldn't do. Like, oh, I wish the character this, but like, we can't go reshoot that. That's like, we can maybe do a couple of pickups. These are indie films and honestly, even real films, bigger films. And I remember thinking to myself, why are we not asking these questions earlier in the process?
Exactly.
So when we were writing Searching and we had our draft ready to go, we actually had feedback sessions for the script. So, we would send it out to a very small group of friends, usually a good mixture of like writers or filmmakers and also normal people. And we would, instead of having them just kind of like email us a couple thoughts or just share a couple thoughts, we interrogated them. We mined them. Because I remember even when people would send me scripts and I would give them thoughts, like I would always be confused, like, don't you want to ask me so much more? And, Aneesh and I are a writing team. So it was even more natural that in the process of writing, searching, we had we had tons of arguments. Like, I think David Kim should do A. Well, no, you're crazy. David Kim should do B. And like, well, I don't know what's right. And we would argue, and we would end up in, writing one thing. But when it came time to, like get feedback on the script from our readers, we can actually ask them that. So we would ask them general questions. What did you like? What did you not like? What was slow?
Okay. But so you're walking into this one, and this is a great thing to discuss. And I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about it. It's a dangerous notion, right?
Yes.
Because everybody has an opinion. And if you get too many opinions, especially differing opinions, like it's one thing to collate. I know a lot of writers that when friends that don't know each other give them the same note, they know it's real, right? Like they know that, okay, These guys don't know each other. There's nothing going on here. Like if they're all calling out the same thing, I have to figure out a way to address it. How do you guys collate what you want to take seriously from these kind of note sessions and what you kind of got to let slide?
I will say the most important thing to me, and I'm also a producer who people submit scripts to me for me to, consider producing. Probably the most initial thing to be responsive about is clarity. So often, I think a sign of a script that needs a lot of work is when a beat occurs that I'm not sure as a reader how I'm supposed to feel about it. And I'm not talking about like an art house kind of movie where it's intended to be like vague and like that's the magic of that kind of storytelling. No, I'm talking about movies in which like clearly it's supposed to mean X, but it's feeling like Z. That's the kind of thing I think feedback is especially good for. Like when we're writing a scene, we have an intention. We want people to feel a certain way because we know that in a couple of more pages, they're going to now suddenly feel this way. So I think for us, feedback was really important that like when you watch a movie and you feel like it's a tight film and it just, they held your hand the right way, like that to me is a script and a movie that is done with the audience in mind in that way. The thing is also in the, in the big boy world of Hollywood, where I've been really fortunate enough to now work on movies that are hundreds of millions of dollars. These studios, like that's how they operate. Everything comes down to feedback screening. Because I think entire arguments between directors and producers and studio executives, they will get resolved with an NRG, which is like this, testing organization who will bring 300 people to Long Beach or Las Vegas and watch a movie and run through questions. Like that's the answer, because oftentimes, you're making movies because you want to get a return on your investment. People like the movie, people feel a certain way, they'll tell their friends, and your investors or your studio financiers will be happy. So it's definitely a dangerous game, but I think if it's probably more dangerous to not be playing it than to be playing it and maybe taking, like extra care to make sure you're telling the story you want to tell.
Sure. Aneesh, what guides you for taking feedback? And knowing what feedback to drop. I mean, the most interesting thing that I've heard some writers talk about is that they say sometimes just getting the note is enough for them, and they don't have to take the note seriously. But the fact that they're getting them alerts them to that there's a glitch right at that point in the script that they could fix on their own. Maybe not the way that their friend or the studio suggests, but it allows them to realize, okay, there is a hiccup here. Aneesh, what guides you?
I would say consensus, like that is, it's like what you were saying when two people don't know each other, we send out the script to, I guess the people theoretically who know each other, but like in our network of at least the first pass, it starts off pretty tightly in the storytelling world, in the industry kind of, and those people generally know each other, but they don't know they're getting the script at the same time. So like we basically have that huge spreadsheet where we're tacking answers and whatever. And if there are 3-4 people saying the same thing, like it's really hard to argue that no matter what what people say, what you think. So I think consensus is where the easiest decisions to sort of like change come from. But we'll look at generally everything and see what people think. And then sometimes when it's not consensus based, like one of us maybe will get swayed by a note and then that only one person said, and, then we'll talk about it and stuff. But for the most part, I think we just address the things that are consensus, like that there is a clear consensus, and consensus meaning the majority of people who read it versus not. Generally that gives you enough of notes. It's not like 2 or 3. It's like consensus actually is pretty intense. Like there's a lot of things that people agree on about what doesn't work or what works in your story. And that would give you a month of work, 2 months of work to address and stuff. And, when we do the same process, when we're editing the films and we're showing it, down the line, when there is no consensus, that's when you stop. That is literally proof that it's good to go, because you will never get everybody sometimes aligned on everything. But if it's split and people are arguing with each other about a note, then you're good, So it's consensus that is the guiding principle.
Interesting. All right. Well, so I want to get into your creative habit before we get into
Jeff, by the way, I don't know if you're curious as a YouTube exclusive, like I can share my screen for 30 seconds and show you guys what this actually looked like. If that's interesting.
Yeah, of course. We've been putting these on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. It's something we only started doing during the pandemic. So you could go to the Backstory Magazine YouTube page and you could see what Sev's going to show us.
All right. So, I mean, this is what this is something we just came up with to help us with the process. We just came up with general questions. Again, like asking people to rate a couple things, anything that, was too confusing, anything that felt deflated emotionally. Then we had our macro questions, talking about the relationships between these two characters and, making sure people were, ever questioning, should they ever be meeting more face to face? We would write down their answers off of this phone call. We talked about various characters, the concept of phone calls, repetition throughout.
If you want to share a PDF of that, I'm happy to put that on the Backstory Magazine website too.
Probably not a PDF, but we'll keep it as an exclusive just for people who are going to walk through this. But we, honestly, this is just an example. Like everyone should make their own, but like we also, we would go to even on page 5, this distinction between therapy and psychiatry bump for you. And the fact that this particular reader did not even think about it was enough to know, because ideally when you're writing, you should be probably questioning already all these things, even if you're not writing with a partner. And it was incredibly helpful. And I think, especially with the philosophy we were just discussing, could make all the difference when you're writing a script, knowing that when you send it to real producers or studios or whatever, having that confidence that these beats are going to land.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you're basically talking about script development. So that is important at any time, of course. And thanks for sharing that with us. That was really cool. I can't believe you guys actually had specific notes about page at a time. That was fascinating. That's a good way to go.
It teaches, like I said, there's consensus with something like that. Consensus will give you a month of work. That's just so specific.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your creative habit. When you guys sit down to write on, of course on Run, but if your habit has changed over time, I'm happy to hear it. How important is outlining to your process when you sit down to start a project, specifically Run, which we'll start getting into now? It's
pretty, big. I mean, we don't write anything until it's fully outlined. I think the thing that we all have, basically the screenplay stage, when we open up final draft, is the last stage of writing. People say I've been describing what I've been doing for the last 4 months as writing, but it's just walking around thinking, and writing with a pen and a paper, just random scribbles or, and I think the only thing for us that is determined or figured out in the screenplay stage, obviously there are multiple drafts of stuff after that, but dialogue is the only thing that's coming in for the first time. That's everything else is sort of figured out by the time we've gotten there. And what we're doing right now, we're writing our next movie. And we started out, we always start the same way. We understand the log line, and then we start to go as to okay, what's the midpoint? What's the break to 3? What's the break to 2? What's the inciting incident? You put those big points in, and then you start to flesh out. So now what we have is basically a beat sheet for our next film, which is not an outline yet, but it's a very specific beat sheet. And then the next stage of that will be breaking that into a deeper outline as to what happens in every scene, as opposed to here's a general idea of what's happening in this section of the story, this section of the story. So how
dogmatic do you think it is, the importance of staying to those points?
How dogmatic did you say?
How dogmatically married to that are you guys? Because some writers, they're yes, I'll have an inciting incident, right? Because a story has a beginning, a call to action. But then some writers really want to get away from beats landing on certain pages or certain instances, while others really subscribe to that formula and figure out ways to break it. So I'm just curious, is there a version that you like of that structure that you always start with and then stray from?
We're pretty so far. I think Run turned out differently in the edit, but so far we've been pretty classically structured.
For listeners that want to find an example of that structure so they could see it for themselves, where would you tell them to look? I would always say something like one of Vogler's books, which was an interpretation of Campbell's hero's journey, but in film. So I know Christopher.
They're all the same. That's the thing. Is like,
right.
There was a document.
See, that's the exact, yes, the writer's journey.
There's
good man, Sev. Good man.
There was I think Sev shared with me at one point, like this story. I got a new laptop, but like the story structure chart. And it's basically like Vogler, Snyder, like McKee, like every single screenwriting coach, and how they look at the story, and when you really look at them, they're all the same.
Yes,
calling the stories, the names of the sections a little differently. The ones the labeling that we subscribe to is Snyder's. It's just Save the Cat. It's very simple, basic, like often scorned, approach.
I think it's scorned when people follow it too dogmatically. I hate to keep using that word, but like they don't do anything. They don't add anything of their own. They just use it like, filler, and then they don't go beyond the filler. So I mean, like I think that's the only reason I've heard really good arguments against Save the Cat. But I mean, for a lot of people, it at least gets the wheels turning and gives them a path to go down. And I think the true artists are the ones that figure out a way to stray from that path and make it their own. That's my little rant on Save the Cat.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think our movies, like, Searching is, it follows Save the Cat to the T. It also follows the hero's journey to the T. And Aneesh was so right, because there is that idea that they're all still kind of telling the same thing, just in different ways. I think the only kind of writing style, that story structure style, I've never been able to wrap my head around is the 8 sequence one. I just have a hard time like understanding what that means. But you asked this whether we stray from the outline or not. I mean, we don't. I think one of the things that I love about how Aneesh and I work together, and honestly, particularly Aneesh, is that we have no fear of killing our babies. Like, sometimes I weep for all of the amazing movies that we've written that will never get seen. Right. Only in the sense that, like, this incredible idea we had for the climax of Searching that we just ended up not doing, not because it didn't work, but otherwise, maybe it wasn't right for character, right for theme, whatever it may be. The other thing we tend to do as writers in this period of writing, where it's many, many months of phone calls and Google Documents, is it's very iterative, because we're in the middle of it right now. We're writing our 3rd feature together. We've done the entire movie from beat 1 to the final beat. It all is there. But now we're spending several months doing the entire movie from the perspective of each of the characters. It's a bit more of an ensemble than we've done before. So it's like, okay, what's each character's backstory? What's each character's arc? And it's like, we're kind of repeating the same process we just did, but it's entirely focused on character. And we're going to probably do another pass that's entirely focused on set pieces and making sure it's all feeling,
right.
cohesive.
You're doing targeted rewrites to hit certain points that once your structure is done. That's great.
Right. And then
people sometimes do an emotional pass, a character 100%. Beat pass. So that's great.
And we're doing that without having yet open final draft. No, that's
great. How long would you say your outlining process usually lasts?
7 months, 8 months,
okay.
And part of it is because, we're actively making these movies. Like, Aneesh is directing, often spending a lot of time in the editing room. I'm producing the movies and I'm producing other movies. So that probably adds padding to the time that it takes. But at the same time, it has been really nice to walk away from these projects and come back, not walk away, but just not be doing it 8 hours a day, every single day, because it's, as I'm sure everyone can relate, it's not the best sometimes creatively. And just the fact that we are writing always with the intention of Aneesh directing and me producing and Natalie producing and our whole team.
Right.
So it's we don't have this pressure to just write and then turn in something to someone else to make, or just to make a paycheck. It's always less about, let's write a movie versus let's make a movie, this is just a phase of that.
Other geeky question, you guys index card or do you just put it in a bullet outline? Last thing about your outline.
Google Docs have really eliminated the, I think, I think for us, the need to use that stuff. We used it a lot on Searching though,
okay.
Because that movie was there were so many threads, and like we just had like we needed to play with the options. And so like I don't think we generally need that stuff to plot out a save the cat structure. Like that's some things that we can just do in a Google Doc. But when it came to like tracking mystery elements, and like resolving certain things, we use that a lot on searching for obvious. We didn't need to use it on Run. We kind of were just very much on dude, I can show the outline for Run actually, or like not the outline, but
I know what you're talking about, the chart we made.
That would be so cool. Screenplay.
There's probably about 1 million files.
Oh yeah,
that's cool that you guys don't card. I mean, as you're looking for the.
But you'll see the cards here. So
this is close to being carded. Yeah,
this is carded actually. Theoretically, yeah, this is actually carded.
I love you guys just having access to all your files and sharing them. No one's ever done this before. This is great.
Well, we are the team that made searching. It feels appropriate.
So those are our cards.
Oh yeah.
We've never shown that before. That's awesome. Yeah.
So you're essentially doing like
it's
like an Excel file basically.
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet, and those are cards. And on the left are our Save the Cat structure sections to help us understand where we are.
Okay. And did you scroll all the way? Did you scroll all the way to the bottom?
All the way to the bottom.
Cool. And obviously, I'm sure you guys know this, but in Final Draft, there's a thing called Beatbox, and it allows you to basically make note cards that you could move around. So it's not this Excel kind of thing. And I think that's kind of a cool thing because you could tag images and videos to it. It's almost like having a big wall that's trapped in your laptop would be the way to say it.
That's cool.
But yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for showing us that.
I would say one of the things that has been helpful to Aneesh and I in writing is we did this with searching to an embarrassing degree where like searching, has so many major set pieces, which are essentially montages, right? He's searching her friends and then there's the news montage and then there's whatever. Those were so headache inducing to try and like, how do we write this? What's the first scene? We would do a Google spreadsheet like that. And then like, something's not right. Then we would literally go to Office Depot and then start sketching it on that. That's not working. Then Aneesh would start handwriting in his notebook. And I think just the process of us continuously just continuing to iterate it from one medium to another, it kind of helped us like wrap our heads around it. Like it's almost like when you were in elementary school and they would have you just write something 1,000 times. Like it was like, oh yeah, like I guess now that I'm writing this in this form, like a trick that somebody taught me when you're editing a movie is to at one point screen the movie in black and white and then also flip the image, because just by seeing the same movie, the same story with a slightly different feeling, it just opens your eyes to things that might be wrong or things that can be improved. This thing that we tried on Run that we just showed you guys, that was our first time doing it. We're probably not going to do it on this next one, but just seeing our story in a different medium was like enough to be like, okay, this could change, this can change.
Run was just Run is so simple that it worked with cards. And that was the reason we approached it that way, is because the story is so what we call left to right, in the sense that every single action is telling you the next immediate action. It's like door is locked, so she goes to window. Like that's the entire movie. Like it's so like left to right that the cards actually felt very simple.
But that's actually why it was really important to have you guys in the podcast, because I was really blown away by the broad strokes you painted in, because the simplicity really became the magic for Run. Because as a thriller, you were talking about clarity earlier. You don't confuse your audience at all. What you're trying to say is going on is very clear, scene to scene, moment to moment. And that's what keeps that tension going. And I want to get into those spoilers. So I can ask you a few other quick craft questions, and then we're going to get right into it. When you sit down to write, do you guys write together or alone? And also, do you give yourself a page count to write each day, or do you give yourself a certain amount of hours to write in?
We give ourselves sectional deadlines because we know the outline so well. Like whatever task is at hand will be this from point 4 to point 9. We'll write and send it over. Oftentimes we do switch around sometimes, but I would say most of the time, like I'll barf up something really quickly. Mostly because like I'm way more anal than Sev is, and so like when it comes to certain I'll pass it over to Sev, and then Sev will do 1,000 notes on it, and then we'll edit it together and work on it together, and we're just basically passing the ball forward, back and forth. And I would say like in the the grand scheme of our relationship, you know, in a lot of ways, like I'm like this person between the two of us, and then Sev is like that, and the goal is to go up to the top, you know, like
Okay.
how very difficult for the Spotify folks.
I was just thinking that, yeah. He was saying,
yeah.
I am this person as he wildly flailed his arms.
But wait. But seriously, page count or hours? What's your goal of the day?
We don't really set anything. We just kind of like it's like every phase of the writing is so different. Like I used to be traveling the country, making indie films and then calling Aneesh at night, who was either in the Bay Area or in LA or in New York when he was working at Google. And now that we're all locked down, like it's just always on the phone. And then usually when we get to the writing phase, we would meet every morning, like 10 a.m. at a coffee shop near our place, and then spend a couple of hours either reviewing what was written the night before and just kind of duking out, okay, well, this period should go here, that line should go here, we don't need this dialogue. And then usually when we would, you know, break away like afternoon, the idea was the homework assignment for tonight is either writing the next pass of whatever, or how do we solve this issue? And usually we would meet up like the next day and then like present each of our like, okay, well, I thought about the homework assignment. Here's my solution. Oh, wait, that's a good solution. I was thinking X, forget about it. So it's just like this constant, like just kind of pushing along. We don't really set deadlines for ourselves, at least in the official way. I don't think so. Right, Aneesh? Like,
no, like the thing is like none of us are lazy. Like, you know, and like, and not to say, I think, and here's the thing. Partnerships are a lot easier for accountability, you know? And I think like if I was writing solo or if Sev was writing solo, I think like deadlines like that and like are very important to kind of get to. But like when one of us is slacking, the other person just says, hurry up or something like that. And, you know, and like you create the thing or you work it out. So there's always a trust though between us that if something's not happening, there's a reason for it. And so like the pressure is different, page count and this count, because like we are each other's deadlines in a way.
Well, and that brings us to the next question about writer's block. Do you guys get writer's block? What do you do for it if you get it? How do you battle it?
We're right now, you know, like when we're writing our next movie right now, and there's an ensemble of 5 main characters. And every single one of them has to be different, you know, like in the sense of like what they do for a living, what certain qualifications are. Like there's all these categories. We want to make sure that every single person is unique and different and also individually contributing to the larger theme of what this movie is about. And like one of the characters is harder than the others for a variety of reasons, you know, and so like we've been playing with 1,000 options in our head and going down 1,000 different paths for this one character to like what boxes she fills out and stuff like that. So like, that's been very difficult for the last few weeks, but the solve for that has been asking a lot of research questions, but in this particular case has been asking a lot of questions to, I can be immigration lawyers, you know, like that, which is very, again, a specific kind of person for our next story, like, and asking all these versions of, could this happen, or do you see this in this field and this in this field, blah, 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 and sort of like figuring out what would be a version. So it's a lot of question asking. Although when we do get writer's block, which often happens to us, we hang up, you know, and basically we'll go off and not talk and think. And usually one of us will text the other person shortly after with some pitch.
And like, and just to continue with that thing, like with this current movie, it kind of, when we say writer's block, it's not like sitting there, like just trying to think of something and can't think of anything. It's usually, we tend to just think of too many things. And like Aneesh will be like, hey, Sev, I'm ready. Like he'll call me and he'll give me a 2-hour TED talk. I am not kidding you guys. Like literally with solution number 1, boom, 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 boom. And here are the pros, here are the cons, solution number 2. And then I'll respond for an hour. And then yesterday I called Aneesh with my 1-hour TED talk of like, okay, well, my assistant and I looked up 40 pages of like congressional hearings. Here's a bunch of research. Here's some Reddit posts I found. Here's some forum posts. All of this is my bibliography. And then here's my pitch. And then like, oh wait, that's actually not a bad idea. And then she's like, what if we take your pitch, combine it with this? And it's like, okay, cool. 3 weeks of work to just get to backstory of character number 5. And we're good to go. But like, it's only block in the sense that the overall movie isn't getting built more and more, but we know that progress is being made. So it's
this is a run spoiler. I mean, I have a great.
Wait, we're going to get to our spoiler section in a second. So save that 1 second. How about this? Let's go to it now. The last non-spoiler question, because we have a lot of ground to cover for Run, obviously, and I know this will push us a few minutes over. But your quick last question in the non-spoiler section is the budget and the schedule of Run. What was your budget and schedule?
Oh man, we can't really reveal that. It's a lot. I mean, it was a studio movie. Run was our first studio movie. It takes place primarily in one location with two actors. One who was a first-time actor, Keira Allen, who killed it, obviously, and Sarah Paulson, who's always amazing. Yeah. It was a very low. It's just about the lowest budget a studio movie can have and still be a studio movie. Schedule was actually quite long for a movie of this size, and it was something because Aneesh came into the film with like knowing every single shot, and it was so meticulous and so pre-planned. One of the biggest battles that Natalie Kasabian and I, constantly were fighting, and not against any particular person, but just against the elements, against the budget, against the schedule, was giving this movie way too many days comparative to how many days movies that typically have. I think it was 34, right, Aneesh?
Okay.
That we got.
Oh, really? I thought it was 32, but it's definitely one of those.
Okay.
One of those two. And like the way it worked, by the way, was like our line producer, we had a deal where like if we were on schedule and on budget by day 6, they would give us one extra day. And like by day 13, they would give us one extra day. So like it was always that push pull because we were pulling from overtime.
I've never heard that. That's cool that they would give you these bonuses if you're staying on schedule. I mean, it makes sense. That's a great way to go.
It's funny. Ryan mentioned something similar with Creed 1, which was like, oh, cool. Like, I guess that is not the most unique thing that happened to us. Yeah.
That's great. Well, so, okay, podcast listeners, if you have not yet seen Run, press pause, go watch it on Hulu, come back, because we're getting into the spoilers. Aneesh, tell me the spoiler that you were just going to say that was a good example.
Yeah, so we were talking about writer's block, and I just remembered one thing, and when we were writing Run, that was kind of sticky for us, and basically, one section of the story was we knew that the daughter leaves the house. She escapes from the house, after this following like the midpoint of her discovery, like she leaves, she like goes across the roof and crawls to her room and gets the asthma inhaler. Then comes to the thing, falls down the stairs. And then finally her toe moves and like gives her this energy to like get back up onto the chair and get out of the house. And we knew that
you just talked about the greatest scene in 10 seconds, but yes.
Yeah. It is a great sequence. I'm very hard on the movie, but that is a great sequence. After she escapes, we wanted there to be an interaction that she has with somebody from the outside world that causes her to almost get away, but results in her coming back for our break to 3 in the basement. And so for a lot of time, we were like, it was a neighbor. And it was some neighbor for far away. And like, we were like, who, like, and Sev constantly was like, dude, I've seen this scene 1,000 times before. There was at one point where like kids were playing basketball and like she had to, dude, like we were pitching out the stupidest thing. She like made a paper plane, or some shit like that. And like with a note on it, and like right when they opened it up, she looked up and they were gone. Yeah. It's something that involved a lot of that stuff. And then it was like, I don't know why. It was like one day we were just thinking about it, hanging up calls, talking to other people, and I remember I definitely one afternoon I would just like, I had smoked a little bit and was talking to my friend about it. And like, and then we were talking and then there was this idea. I was like, we're introducing the mailman a little bit in the mail, like that she really wants college acceptance letters. What if we made the mailman more of a character early on, just introduced him in the story. And now she runs into the mailman and suddenly it was like, yep, that's our scene. There's no question. Like that character exists in our world. It's not random. It feels inevitable, which is a great thing that any story should feel like when something happens, like when that car turns around and it's the mailman, it is just inevitability, which is
right. Like, and then you also get the mail truck is a big daunting truck. So you get to have this extra little thriller moment of like, oh my God, is she going to get hit? And like that Nielsen rating goes up for a bit. I mean, it just kind of,
well, and also fits, he's able to fit her inside of it. And, you're very cruel people to dispose of Pat Healy so quickly. Cause I love Pat Healy. He's the best. He's been amazing in the series as well. He's a great writer as well. And an actor.
Oh, he's incredible as a writer. Have you read Snow Ponies?
Yes.
He's amazing.
He's the man. He's the man. Well, so, okay. So, since we're in the spoiler section, kind of hanging the movie off the Munchausen syndrome proxy, which Diane, the mother, has, in which it is a woman who wants her daughter to always be sick. So she is actually making her sick so that she could gain sympathy from other people, but also be controlling of her daughter's life completely. When did that idea creep up as one of the film's main secrets? How early on in your process did you come across that?
Okay. So when we had written the film, Munchausen by proxy was not in the cultural lexicon, and by the time we were going to production, there was like 3 other things now simultaneously going into production about Munchausen. And so the film originally was supposed to be structured almost like a mystery, where it's like, what's going on? And I think in a lot of ways, the drowning of the market in Munchausen, starting with the HBO documentary, followed with the Hulu series, followed with Ryan Murphy's stuff, followed with Something in Sharp Objects. It was constantly Munchausen. And so we immediately, when you see the film, nobody is surprised that it's Munchausen. Like you see a girl in a wheelchair, and you see a mom who's controlling her, Munchausen. And originally the film was supposed to work as a mystery, and the script did, because when people read the script, it was not in a period where everything was Munchausen. And so I think like a lot of this, which came from a headline on print, started off as, it was always supposed to be first half Hitchcock movie and second half Don't Breathe. And what came out of it was 1/3 Hitchcock movie, 2/3 Don't Breathe, and like, and that 1/3 is my favorite part, like the house stuff. The first act of this movie is like, I'm the best, is it's so contained, and so it's so like slowly building and stuff like that. But it was originally supposed to focus like that, but I think like overall it came early on as a big lesson to us moving forward. Like, don't rip from the headlines, because someone's going to rip it faster than you.
Right. And so that leads into my next question, in which, even your trailer is very suggestive, and eventually you solved your problem in which the audience is going to guess it. So rather than try and hide it as the only twist of your movie, you leaned into it. What was your debate about how long to keep the secret from your protagonist, from Chloe, before she realizes it and before it's cemented as, am I being paranoid or is this real? Because I could see that as being a difficult thing to piece into your structure as to when it becomes her self-awareness that it's for sure a thing.
That's such a great question, man. And like, Aneesh was touching upon this, but just about every deleted scene from the movie, many of which are available on Hulu, by the way. If you watch the movie on Hulu, go to special features, they're all from that section of the movie where before it was like confirmed this is what's happening. And a lot of the arguments to cut these scenes was because, the audience is going to be ahead of the character here. So like, we're just belaboring getting to the point, even though some of these scenes are super short. In the writing phase, we definitely were, like Aneesh was saying, like we were leaning into the idea that this first half of this movie is a psychological thriller. So you may be ahead of Chloe, which a lot of our feedback readers were, yet you're still in it for the ride. Like the Hitchcock example of like either a bomb blows up and everyone's, shocked, or you're seeing the bomb ticking and it's only a matter of time before it blows up. These characters have no idea. So, we were playing with this cat and mouse idea, or like, it's almost like this mother and daughter kind of having their old Cold War arms race. Like who's going to best the other when it comes to like knowing what information. It was a really interesting challenge. And I think had this been released before a lot of these other movies that dealt with similar themes, we probably could have had more fun with like extending that reveal. But like Aneesh was saying, like because of when the movie came out and what the marketplace was, like it felt like collectively the goal was to just like, make it about the journey and less about the destination. It's like, all right, what this movie is, and we're gonna have fun with these incredible performances, this incredible directing, and just really old school classic thriller vibes that are not as common these days.
If we were to go back and rewrite this thing, knowing the market that it would take place and we had to make the movie, I would change 2 things. Number one, there would not be an exposition box at the end of the film in the basement. And number
Right.
two, I think the clue that sets her off should be totally different. Like I think like what it should be like, this is pitching out of my butt right now, but like, it would be like mom reveals like mom comes home one day and daughter finds black stuff, like liquid. And you're like, what is this? And it turns out it's printer ink, and the printer ink, and there's no printer in the house. And the printer ink is being used to print labels that are on these things, like go a totally circuitous route.
Rather than the pills, you mean?
If that makes sense.
So you're saying rather than the pills, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, rather than the pills, start with a paperclip. Start with something so innocuous that does not go, yeah, she's obviously poisoning. Start it with like, it's just an object in the house that doesn't make sense, and it's just like weird because like then the audience is now going 1,000 different directions before you're coming back, even if it has to get in the middle of the movie back to the movie that you expect.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because that scene, you guys are doing this math in which with the pills, when she's trying to figure out what they are, which is kind of like her first big peeling back with the scene at the drugstore as, the affirmative, she's given a shot to subdue her, for God's sake. So that like that scene was amazing too. But you have the internet shut off. She's in a wheelchair, which I'm assuming is kind of a nod to Rear Window in a way. Was that always like she was going to be in a wheelchair, by the way, in your earliest iterations?
Yeah, always.
Okay.
And not to Rear Window, just it's there. It wasn't.
Okay. No, that's cool. So she has no solution of how to find out what these pills are. So you have her literally, she can't call information because there's going to be a 99-cent charge. You're like, you said left to right. She's going through all the possibilities. But then you arrive at her sweet talking a complete stranger that she just random dials into looking it up on his computer. When did you arrive at that? Because that was so random and so funny to watch.
Well, I mean, for us, like one of our favorite writing tactics or one of the tools that we have in our writing kit is writing ourselves into corners. Like the idea was like, like, I don't know if you've seen The Truman Show, which is like one of my favorite movies. And like, that's about a man who realizes his entire world is all fictional and everything is designed to keep him and believing a certain truth. If the scale is enormous, like literally there's a moon and everything. Like this is kind of like such a smaller version of that. Like this girl also comes to learn her entire world is fictional, but it's like all in a house. And we were trying to think, okay, what are ways that like we can create obstacles for her in the house? And like, Searching is an entire movie that takes place on a computer in which a guy is looking up true stuff on his computer. We didn't want to repeat that. But it made sense. Everything now you can look up on the internet. So boom, she'll lose the internet. Okay, well then what's your other connection to the outside world? The phone. So we're like, okay, we got to make sure that's not too easy. She doesn't have a cell phone. She's got to use this particular phone. And when we were trying to come up with where she can get the answer, we came up with a billion ideas. And like, we knew that we wanted it to be hard. Like you could call random numbers and somebody can hang up on you, or you can call random numbers. And I was like, all right, I'll look it up for you. At one point we were flirting with the idea, maybe she calls maybe somebody who's a bit older, who's not that great on their phone, who's like, now do what now? What's Google? And she's like, oh my God, man, please just open up your homepage, blah, blah, blah. And we realized that there's probably something more emotional about calling somebody who's just in the middle of something, but is still not going to hang up because that's just who he is. And by the way, that was a cameo from our friend and incredible actor, Tony Revolori, by the way, who like you might know him from the Spider-Man movies. It was just a matter of like coming up with like, what is the most challenging thing for her to be in? And it's kind of a fun sequence because while it's humorous in what's happening, with their talk, she's like, I'm an orphan, feel sorry for me. Like at the same time, at any moment, her mom might come in. It was a fun sequence. Yeah.
That was a great sequence. I'm curious about the theater escape scene because you really, you define that it's over. She has discovered the dark secret and her mom is injecting her. Was it always going to end with the injection there? Because the whole sequence is fantastic, but her injecting her in public to subdue her and then locking her in her room was definitely a very, I hate to use the word misery, like that movie. I kept thinking back to it, of a captive, but it was a very distinct moment. I was just curious if you could tell us about the creation of it.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, like originally this script, that was the midpoint, like the first half of the movie is the daughter's breakthrough two is what is this pill? And the midpoint is her discovering the pill.
Okay.
And the second that she discovers the pill, but mom now knows that she knows, and subdues her. And then daughter wakes up, and the second half of the movie is misery, is don't breathe, is getting out of this space. So it's always going to be the halfway point, which was like slow creep, discovery. And now everything just gets spiked up. So
Great.
We were always going to have a moment in that middle that was going to do something like that.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick because we just recently published Backstory Magazine issue 42. And I want to talk to you about it for a second because I'm really hoping my podcast listeners will support my passion project. You know, you could see what's inside our table of contents by going to backstory.net, and you'll see some interesting things. We publish screenplays in their entirety by Simon Kinberg and Joe Carnahan, accompanied by interviews. These are unproduced projects that they would love to see get made one day, and that's why they were cool enough to share them with you. And, we also have interviews with the top showrunners, film directors, and screenwriters in the industry today in Backstory Magazine. And you could totally experience what we're about if you've never read us before by test driving us over at backstory.net. You could read us there because we have a full free issue for you to read. You could also read us through our iPad app, or you could read us on a desktop and laptop at backstory.net. And it's good stuff. And if you decide that you want to support my passion project, which I hope you do because your support is more important now than ever, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and that will save you $5 off a yearly subscription to Backstory Magazine. It'll give you our access to our latest issue and access to our archive, which goes back about 2.5 years. And we're continuing to add new issues into our archive. So you could continue to go back as we have time to add new old issues, I mean. So look, it would really mean a lot for me for you to check out Backstory Magazine. So I thank you for considering it. And while you're surfing around online, our sponsor Final Draft has an amazing deal for you. With Final Draft 11, you could test drive that software for 60 days for free. That means you could run it and you could experience every single feature of Final Draft software. You could start writing a screenplay, and it's the software that's used by Oscar winners like Guillermo del Toro, Sofia Coppola, Aaron Sorkin, and so many more. And to take advantage of this unique offer, all you got to do is go to trial.finaldraft.com. And over there, you'll be able to sign up for a 60-day free trial, and you could get cracking on your screenplay. You could see what all the features are like. You could learn how to use Beatbox, which we talk about in this podcast, which is a great way to digitally note card and move your cards around, but also attach pictures for reference or music or video even. Like, it's a really cool feature. So there's a lot to do in Final Draft. And if after 60 days you decide you want to buy it, here's a code for you that will save you 20% off your purchase. The code is QAPOD21. That's the letter Q, the letter A, pod, P-O-D, 21 will save you 20% off your purchase of Final Draft over at finaldraft.com. So please go test drive Final Draft for 60 days. Go start on your passion project, and hopefully maybe we could talk about it one day. And of course, as we get back into this podcast, I hope you will go to the YouTube Backstory Magazine page so you could actually see when Sev takes over this Zoomcast by showing us very cool things from his computer. It's amazing how organized he is. And you'll be able to see it over there. You'll be able to see the storyboards. You'll be able to see the animatic and some of the outline stuff as well. So that's a really cool thing that's going on aside from just listening to the podcast in iTunes or Spotify. And look, if you have not seen Run, please make sure to go see it over on Hulu because it's absolutely fantastic. And it's a film that I know you'll dig. So now, without any further ado, let's get right back into our conversation with Aneesh and Sev about Run. Talk us through the escape scene, like what it took to be able to shoot her going out the window like that. And, the prep for it with safety, but also just kind of diagramming it in your head. Because one of the things that you guys did really, really well here that's really important for Suspense is the creation of geography. Because the more that you're in touch with the space that the characters inhabit, the more that we understand, like them, how they need to escape and what they need to do to escape. And you did a fantastic job of really setting up the house and her geography because, again, you kept things so simple, confined to one location. But it was really sublime to see her crawling on the side of the roof like that. So tell us just a few things that we wouldn't know that needed to go into such a great sequence.
I mean, I'll just start really quickly. When we're dedicating ourselves to writing a movie in a contained location, you want to use every inch of that location. And we knew early on, she's going to have to end up on top of the house, just like how we knew she was going to end up in the bowels of the house at some point. In pre-production, finding the house was so important for so many reasons, and we shot the movie in Winnipeg, Canada, for tax incentive reasons. I remember this is probably not a surprise, but we had more meetings about the roof sequence than we did about anything else in the movie.
Sure.
And I remember early on, a lot of our department heads and our line producer and people involved with the money were kind of coming to us saying, hey, like, guys, like, this is getting too expensive. Can we do it in this way? Which would be, maybe shoot it entirely on green screen, or like, it'll cut down our shooting time, cut down our budget. And I remember at one point, Natalie and I were like, guys, like, this is our trailer, like, this is the centerpiece of this movie. This is why we're making this movie. Like this is where the money should go. Like, if not to this, then what else? And it was a lot of producing work to try and continue to prove that we can do this. We had the editors edit together kind of like a really cheesy animatic to just prove like the scale of this thing. We obviously had an incredible stunt team who was working with Kira Allen and our amazing stunt double who had to do some of the real life stuff. Ironically, the very first sequence we shot on day one was the exterior of the house, which is usually not how you want to start a movie. You probably would much rather start with a simple dialogue scene to get everyone warmed up. But we had to shoot that way because we were shooting at a time in which the winter was coming very quickly and there was a lot of danger of snow and freezing temperatures. So we had to get the most, difficult thing out of the way first. And we also shot it on the last day of filming, which was day 34, where we shot on a soundstage to get a lot of the close-ups of Kira on a reconstruction of the roof for some of the more delicate insert stuff that we didn't have time for
with a blue screen, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it was an amazing sequence. You touched on it a second ago. Exposition is really tough because you don't want to always feed your audience, but you do need to get things across. And as you said, you called it the exposition box that Chloe discovers in the basement when she's locked down there. And the reveal of, something again that you smartly did once you realized that the Munchausen syndrome was so out there that you needed something else as a twist. And here the twist was that, Diane kidnapped this baby and it's not even her actual daughter that she's controlling. And that Diane is also an abuse survivor herself. You pack a lot into that box. And actually, you did it in some really good ways. And some of the things Diane says, too. What was the challenge of that? I mean, you said that you would exclude it this time around if you were to go back and remake it. But you put a lot in, and the movie actually benefited from that second twist. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I think we agree with the fact that the movie benefited from the second twist. Originally that box had a lot more information in it. It had information about her dad and the story of that, and there was just a lot of backstory in it. Funny enough, like the twist was actually something that was not something that we had expected for it to go in the film. To be honest, it was not something that was in the original drafts of the film. She was always her daughter, and I think the more that Munchausen sort of became prominent, it became clear that the audience expected something out of that box that was really, really big. So then the twist became kind of right there for the taking, we had written in an opening scene that was almost suggestive of the fact that the baby didn't make it, and we were like, okay, we should just make that twist happen there. And so we kind of just dropped that twist in, and it started making the box a lot more exciting. While separating ourselves from the Munchausen conversation for the entire duration, which is sort of what you're suggesting. So we try to slim it down to as little as stuff, but it used to be filled with the backstory of the mom. It used to be filled with here's how the mom became the person she is. And that's one of the things that I think is missing in the film is a little bit more backstory on the mom's character.
Do you want to tell us what you had?
You can watch it. It's in the deleted scenes, actually.
No, I saw the deleted scenes. I was just curious if there was anything else. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was. I mean, originally we were playing. Dude, there was a moment where we were gonna go and see if we can add another scene into the film, which is right after the pharmacy scene. She gets stabbed in the and gets subdued. We go down, and instead of cutting to the drive back, We're instead like now we're like looking through these like really dark door, like a really like we're looking through a very slim thing, and we're looking at this hallway, and it's out of the 70s, you know, and it says like
it's a flashback. Got it.
Yeah, and then like you're basically like packing, and you're watching this woman like pace like left and right, pace left and right, pace left and right, pace left and right, and suddenly like the woman like turns and she looks right at the camera, and she like opens the door, and she like opens the door, and we realize like we're looking at the eyes of young Diane, and the mom says something horrifying, and then we cut. And now like we're on the sequence back. I love that scene, but like I think there was a lot more of who mom was in the film and what we were kind of pitching that didn't make it in. But I'm glad we did put that twist in, because it certainly separates us from the pack a little bit more.
Yeah. You know, editing's the last stage of storytelling. You guys had 2 editors on this film. What was the thing that surprised you the most in the editing? And as you said, the deleted scenes could be watched at Hulu. Was there anything modular that you felt that you needed to move? Something that surprised you, having been with your script for so long and so much planning, that in the editing you still needed a new solution that you didn't expect to get in?
Yeah, I mean, searching, we, edited the film, which is almost exactly the script that we wrote. Run changed quite a bit, like for some of these reasons that were just due to the marketplace. A lot of it was when we were testing the movie, realizing people were too ahead of the story. So we, this might sound sacrilegious, but at one point we considered seriously maybe even cutting the scene of Chloe coming down in the middle of the night to check the internet, and cutting the moment where you reveal Diane's been watching her, which I know is crazy because that's such a great moment. It's such a thrilling, iconic, probably more part of the movie. But when you see that, there's no more question in your mind that there is something going on with the mom. And
you're right. It also opens up a can of worms of why doesn't Diane aggressively try and stop her more? But she does have her counter to it in the next.
Yeah, and I think Diane's trying as much as she can to preserve this like false bubble, but like those are discussions that that happens on every movie. Like literally every movie. We were, I think, probably lucky with searching in a lot of ways, but that happened quite a bit. By the way, just because I have it, would you care to see some of these roof stuff that I was just mentioning, Jeff, for your YouTube
absolutely
viewers? All right, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. This is
I love Zoom show and tell with you guys.
This is our cinematic that we made, and a lot of this we made, so that everyone could see this is the vision of the movie. But to be frank with you, a lot of it was also made. You can see the highly detailed animations.
That's all you need. That's great.
A lot of it was also made to kind of just prove to certain people, sorry, she has a nightmare face. Like this is almost like a, inch for inch direct shot of what we had with the crane, like trying to make sure people saw that this is going to really have scale. And what's funny is like,
did you know your house at that point? Like, so is that coming from the location?
Yeah. So this is interesting. Okay. We had a lot of arguments about, are we going to shoot this thing 50% on location, 50% on stage, or 90% on location, 10% stage? What are the pros? What are the cons? And 10% location, 90% stage. And like, as
Sev, you're on fire, man. You like every angle.
We were trying to come up with, this particular shot in this scenario is going to be, it's going to take 40 minutes to set up, 20 minutes to shoot, blah, 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 blah. But like in the version that is, this much, we're talking about, how many total main unit hours, and like, sunset and sunrise. Like that's really important when you're shooting in a cold area in which you only have 6.5 shootable hours per day. So a lot of this was kind of always this uphill battle to just try and preserve this sequence, because at the end of the day, like this is a thriller. It's supposed to be theatrical. And like, Kira Allen, we cast this incredible young actress who not only is an amazing actor, but she's also physically insanely like in shape. And she got in shape for this movie. It was all about trying to make sure we can keep this spectacle in an otherwise contained thriller.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's great that you did that. So you had your location when you did that animatic, yeah?
We did, yeah.
Okay. And was it a specific program that you guys were using, or did you hire like a house to do it? Because some people contract.
That was done by our production designer.
Okay.
Because that sequence, just everybody needed to be on the same page.
Yeah, no, that's important. There's some programs now. I can't remember. One of my friends uses one of them for people that can't draw, but that are directors or even screenwriters. There's some programs where you could get these
that's cool,
generic elements, right? You could just get house, and you could zoom in on roof, and you could put any character there and kind of do what you did. Not really animated, but to get those kind of storyboard moments. So that makes sense as well. That was really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I bring this up only because we were talking about editing. I only bring this up when writers do it really extraordinarily, and you guys did. Transitions are not always thought about in writing, but you had some cuts that were so scripted. Like the funniest is when she sees the name under the pill sticker and it cuts to audio of Diane saying, "Oh, you figured it out." And then like it cuts to Diane looking over her shoulder on the computer and they're talking about something else. But it was just a great moment. And it's great to see when writers really are able to think about transitions in their screenplays. At what point did ideas like that come to you? Is that kind of like a final pass?
That is something we give, editing has done a lot, is a huge part of that. Every single transition in this movie, for the most part, was done on paper. My favorite one is the cut to the tomato. Like a hard cut, like what color is the pill? You're looking at a green pill, match cut to a red tomato. And that to me, that is like, that to me is like one of those, like, I'm always gonna be proud of that cut. But yeah, it's something that we come up with in the writing. Like, we don't want to leave us, like, it's a bad scene that if it doesn't end in some way that like directly gives you fuel for the next scene, and there's a lot of that in Run, a lot of transitions that feel like they fuel the next scene immediately. But yeah, definitely something we care about right in the beginning.
Great transitions. I mean, the end sequence of her in the hospital, like we're so happy that she's made it there. It's almost surprising that Diane took her there, right? But she had to, because she poisoned herself and Diane didn't want to lose her. And, she was figuring out a way to kind of keep her restrained. It's just great to see her helpless in the bed, trying to signal the nurse, and then Diane kidnapping her to get her out. Talk about the challenges you faced as writers for that final sequence, because, here you have this very interesting goal of the whole movie. She wants to go to University of Washington and she's at the UW hospital, so she's kind of made it there in a way, but then she's being snuck out against her will. Was it always going to end like that? Did it always end with, Diane dying in gunfire? Tell us some of the variants and, other left turns that you had for that ending.
Man, that's great. I'm glad you picked up on that. I mean, so many things. I think, one of the, the movie's so much about Chloe's journey for independence. And, in that third act, to her horror, she had this crazy plan. My mom needs me. So if I try and take some poison that might kill me, she might actually bring me somewhere to save my life. So that worked. But she comes to learn immediately she now has lost even more independence, because now she can't move anything. She can't talk. It's like we were like taking away everything that she ever had. That climax changed quite a bit. And actually, you talked about editing. Like, that was a huge credit to our editors and even specifically Natalie Kasabian, because we were considering reshooting a lot of that hospital stuff, because when we were filming the movie, a lot of the ending was going to take place outdoors. Like, it was going to be mom had already taken her out of the hospital. She's about to enter the car. Literally, like, it's over. If she doesn't get rescued in the next 10 seconds, it's done. But sadly, where we were shooting, it just became too cold and we were not able to shoot outdoors anymore. It would not have been healthy or safe. And honestly, probably would not have been conducive to like the creative storytelling if our characters are freezing their butts off. Right. So we had to stage it inside, which was a bit of a bummer, because like, you want that like catharsis of an ending, like that big open space. And we were, there was elements of it that we just also had to just reshoot for other reasons. And luckily we were able to find in the editing a way to kind of restructure it. Cause there used to be one additional confrontation at the ending where like Diane, like, crazy fact, but like in the ending of the movie right now, when we reveal Diane has the gun out, like as she's about to make her final break, that used to be a shot of her putting the gun away. That we reversed it. And we reversed it because it was, now it looks like she's taking it out, because that was directly following a quick confrontation she had with security, where like she pointed the gun at them and told them, stay the F away. So like, those are all things that we were able to find in the editing room, which is amazing, because it almost looks like it was exactly intended. But yeah, man, we had to make a lot of concessions, and luckily it worked out for the most part. I
mean, I could have seen her dying, but you then have this tag onto your ending of years later that, Chloe's coming to visit her in a mental hospital. And it's fascinating that she's now drugging her and giving her some of that revenge. Like I could see you cutting to black after she's liberated, and it's unclear if Diane lives. Tell us about that tagged on ending, because it was interesting to see Chloe take revenge and give her those same pills and have a little bit of that darkness in her as well.
Yeah, I think the original, one of the first ideas was like, I think all of the best thrillers sort of remind you, even after the character has achieved success, what the movie that you watched just was, and like Misery does it really well. Gone Girl does it really well, where that last frame, like even though when the character's out of conflict, is still something's going on,
Yeah.
you know? And I think like horror movies try to do it, and the horror movies always do it the same, because like the evil spirit was actually not gone, cut to black, you know, like they always do that. But like the idea was for this one, and this is something that again got taken out over the course of the edit, with getting rid of the backstory with the mom's character. But like we used to talk about in the version where she was actually related, we used to talk about like this idea of this thing passing from grandma to mom, from like mom's mom to grandma to mom to daughter, and like this thread that like abuses and just like
the cycle of abuse.
They pass this thing down. And that used to be a topic in the film. Mom would often talk about her grandma. We would see grandma in the house, and then in the newspaper, that backstory of Diane was directly about what her grandma did to her. And we would understand that this was all just passed down. And by the end of the film, what that ending was supposed to do was like acknowledge that like this messes with you, and like what Diane did to Chloe did affect her and did create did pass this thing down to her. But the good news is she's not passing it down further. She's sending it back up. Right. You know, and like her daughter doesn't have that problem anymore, she's not
right. And she wouldn't treat her own kids that way either.
Exactly. And so like it was supposed to function like that. And I think when we got rid of all of the backstory and stuff, it sort of ends up just being like a gotcha twist, which I think worked for some people and was extremely random for others. But the question is, how long could she do that for? Like, wouldn't Diane try and stop her with security and say, hey, this girl's poisoning me or something like that? Or would anyone even listen to Diane? Or did Diane feel like she was getting what she deserved? So yeah, it opens those doors, but it's a fun twist to end on for sure. I guess it brings us to the other question of why do you guys think Diane sent in her application to college anyhow, if she never wanted her to go? Because I easily could have seen that she never sent it in. Like, you know, the application could have been in the box rather than the acceptance letter.
It's funny you say that. We used to have a sequence where Chloe discovers a rejection letter from UW and gets really upset about it, as currently in the movie. And then as she looks at it closer, as she moves it, it becomes clear that this is a forgery, that it's actually not from UW, that mom had actually taken the time to like forge this thing. Maybe she never even sent the letter in or whatever, but we ended up simplifying it because it was one of those things where like Aneesh was talking about, like if we went to go back to redo it a different way, like at this point in the movie, like you probably are caring less about her getting into college than you are about the mailman and the injections and all the other kidnapping and chains. So yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think we kind of left it vague enough so that maybe you can surmise what is what, but it just felt more important I think the way we kept it was always kind of in service of pacing and simplicity and all that.
Yeah. I know we ran over time, so I guess I'll hit like the last big question here. You know, what was your toughest scene? So for both of you, your toughest scene on the page and how you creatively rose to the challenge. And then Aneesh, for you, your toughest scene as a director. So Sev, we could start with you just to put you on the spot, buddy.
Probably
your
the
toughest
basement
scene on the page, the one you came back to the most, the one that you were sweating the most.
It's got to be the basement. I mean, that is a long scene. You know, like there's probably a general standard of screenwriting where you want to keep your scenes to a couple of pages, but that is a huge scene in which the character goes through so many revelations, so many twists and turns. At one point is fighting for their life. I mean, it is a monster of a scene. And there was a lot of, how do we make sure mom is not too crazy, but just crazy enough? And like, you know, Sarah has this amazing ability to like go so big, but still keep it relatively grounded. And we can lean into that on the day, but writing it, you're not really sure who's going to play this character. It's to me, like the biggest swing that we took was to me, it was really important that people know that when Chloe is swallowing that poison, she's doing it as an act of defiance, not as an act of giving up, but rather like, I know you need me, so I'm going to take this so that like, you're going to save my life. And like, well, people get that. And like, what does mother need to say in that moment so that people really get that? And like, there's obviously going to be a way of doing it that's going to be too much. So it's like, it was a challenging scene to write.
Yeah, find balance. And also I will say that like Paulson's performance was so amazing because, you know, you have that borderline of drama versus camp. And luckily it didn't go the full camp route. You know, it stayed the full drama. Aneesh, what scene was the most difficult for you to put on the page? And what scene was the most challenging for you as a director? It doesn't have to be the same scene.
The basement. It was,
okay,
it turns out sometimes that is like, yeah, it was the basement, you know, like it was, and I don't think that's a coincidence that the hardest scene to write was also the hardest scene to make. I mean, I think if you were looking at it from pure technical elements, I think the answer that everybody wants is like the roof, you know, but the roof was technically, but like there's a difference between knowing something's going to be that hard and planning it so out and having so many resources to help, then the basement, which you can't rely on anything but camera and actors, you know? And I think like that was a very tough scene. Again, it used, like Sev said, it used to be so much more drawn out. She was discovering 9 other things. So to always separate those emotions and have the camera be telling a story that feels interesting enough still and not the same, and to block that scene was really tough. You know, like she had so much action to do in such a tight space. How does she move and how does the camera move that make that scene actually interesting? And so we would like put objects here and there and design we literally drew up the basement so that it could be interesting visually. And so like, there was a lot of, and on top of that, you're just like dealing with like the most intense thematic material of the entire film. So like nobody's happy, you know, like no one, like that sequence was not fun to shoot whatsoever. You know, like it was tough. Like it was.
How many days were you in the basement, Sev? I mean, Aneesh.
4. I think we were there for 4 days. Yeah.
4.
Intense days. A lot of
just so much, just like it was miserable, you know, like it was, but we were getting.
But you're saying it was miserable not because of the logistics of shooting in a tight space, but because of the thematics of what was going on within the scenes.
Yeah, like
okay.
Like the daughter wakes up, learns her mom is poisoning her, and like discovers secret on secret on secret on secret, and then the mom comes and she's fucking crazy, and she's telling her all these things that she just heard, and like it's like you think those actors are going both of them separately and being like this? It's like no, they're there, you know, too. Right. So you're every and like everyone's quiet on set, you know, you're in a quiet space and like any sound goes off and like it, you know, there's so many.
Was it on a soundstage or was it in the house?
Soundstage. Yeah.
Okay. Because I would think for something that complicated, you would need breakaway walls and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's what we had.
And how many cameras did you generally shoot on?
We always had a backup camera, but I hated that camera. I won. You know, everything that made it into the film was on the A cam.
Okay. And then,
wait, did nothing from the B cam make it into the film?
No way. I think I'd be wrong if I said nothing from the B cam made it into the film.
Right.
But like it was definitely something that I probably fought tooth and nail to not have in the movie.
Well, so you always had
from her back when she goes and sits down helped us a lot.
Well, so Aneesh, are you saying that you always had 2 cameras running, but you generally didn't use the B cam?
Yeah. I mean, I would.
So would you still flip around your A cam on a dialogue scene then, rather than just use the B cam's flip?
Yes.
Interesting.
I think usually when you shoot 2 cameras, you're always going to flip for dialogue scenes because you can only really ever light for one direction.
Okay.
But this light is so nice.
Sev, I know people are going to ask.
The B cam is usually just.
Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, like, usually the B cam is just for getting different sizes of a direction rather than getting different directions. But yeah.
But Sev, only because people are going to ask. I saw on your little YouTube video that you were showing us your little you know preconceived. It was saying like how long you expected each setup to take. Who came up with that number?
Our first AD.
Your first AD. Okay.
First ADs have this uncanny ability to just like look at a scene, talk to a director, get to know the DP, know the producers, and be like, yeah, we're going to take this long on this scene. And
That's great. I was just curious. Well, so what's next? Tell us, is there a title for what you're writing? You guys have been really generous with your time. I know we went over. Are you able to tell us a title of what you're writing or anything about it?
Not the title, but you know, we're writing a heist film next.
Okay, great.
Ensemble. So like, you know, every team in that ensemble needs to be different. So like, we're trying to do our own take on a heist film, and I think like doing something, you know, just what is our take on a heist movie? And you know, I it's funny. I was watching the Rick and Morty. Do you watch Rick and Morty?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I was watching the Rick and Morty heist episode.
To be clear, I forced Aneesh to watch it because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I don't watch Rick and Morty, but like the 2 episodes I've seen have been genius. But like the Rick and Morty episode just made me go, wow, we got to beat that parody, you know? And like, like that thing was so funny and so accurate. But it's a good measure of like making sure that whatever we're adding to this canon,
right,
worthy and
goes in a different direction. Right.
Right. And ours is not a parody though, and we've already said that it's set against the backdrop of immigration.
Okay. All right.
So
Cool.
This is a deeply personal one. This is the one that we've kind of been aiming for the past couple of years. So
well, that's great. I apologize for going over time. You guys have been so generous with your time. I did not expect these amazing bits of show and tell. It was fantastic. As you could tell, I absolutely love your film. I thought you guys just did a lot of great things and runs. So Sev, Aneesh, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been nice talking to you.
Thanks, man. This is awesome.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Very special thanks again to co-writer and director Aneesh Chaganty and co-writer producer Sev Ohanian for being so generous with their time and doing this super long podcast talking about their latest film, Run. I absolutely love the film. I'm sure you could tell that from this podcast. So if you have not yet seen Run, go support independent film, watch it on Hulu, tell your friends about it because it's just fantastic writing and directing and acting as well, of course. So in case you missed this announcement earlier, if you didn't know, you could go over to the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, and over there you'll be able to see any time that Sev took over my computer screen to show us these cool animatics, storyboards, and outlines that he was pulling up on his computer when he was doing a screen share. And it's really cool stuff. So make sure to tell your friends about Run. Go see Run. Of course, if you're looking to sit down and write a screenplay, I have an amazing deal for you. Final Draft has just launched a 60-day free trial of Final Draft 11. That means that you will be able to use every single feature that you want to test drive Final Draft for 60 days. Completely for free. That means you'll be able to use the exact same screenwriting software that Oscar winners like Guillermo del Toro, Sofia Coppola, and Aaron Sorkin, and so many other great writers have used. And here's how you could find the test trial. You go to trial.finaldraft.com, and that's where you'll be able to sign up for your 60-day free trial. And then if you dig Final Draft, which I know you will, because hopefully you'll start a screenplay and you'll get into it and you'll want to finish it. This is assuming you don't finish it in 60 days. And by the way, that's okay. You could buy a Final Draft, and I'm going to give you a discount code that will save you 20% off your purchase, which is a significant savings. So the discount code that will save you 20% off your purchase of Final Draft, which you could purchase at finaldraft.com, is QAPOD21. That's the letter Q, the letter A, pod, which is spelled P-O-D like dog, and then the numbers 21. So QAPOD21 will save you 20% off your purchase of Final Draft over at finaldraft.com. So make sure to check it out. And while you're surfing around online, I really hope you also consider reading issue 42 of Backstory Magazine, which we're so excited to launch recently. There's so many great things in there. We got amazing interviews with today's top writers, directors, showrunners, comic book artists. There's a lot to see in this latest issue, and playwrights as well. I always forget playwrights. And so, storytellers is our mission. And you can check out our table of contents over at backstory.net, and you could read us on a desktop or laptop, or of course through our iPad app as well. So, there's a lot of good stuff over there. And if you want to give us a test drive, there's a free issue you could read through the iPad app or through backstory.net on a desktop or laptop. And by reading the free issue, you should know if you want to become a subscriber. And I hope the answer is yes, because you subscribing to Backstory is important now more than ever, because we could really use your support during the pandemic, because we want to keep producing great content and we can't do it without you. So as a thank you, we're offering discount coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5. And you just enter it at checkout at backstory.net, and then your login credentials will work on a desktop or laptop or even in our iPad app. And once you subscribe, you'll have access to our current issue, number 42. You'll also have access to our archive, which goes back like 2.5 years. We're continuing to add other issues to our archive. Anytime we have time, we have to upload every single article, one article at a time. So it's very time consuming. And so you'll have access to our ever-growing archive. But look, it'll really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners support my passion project. So thanks for considering subscribing to Backstory. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2021. All rights reserved. And folks, look, if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to chat with you when I have time and respond to your emails or whatever. You could always reach me at yogoldsmith@gmail.com. You could find me on Twitter as Yo Goldsmith and on Instagram as Yo Goldsmith. You could find me on Twitter via Backstory_mag, and same on Instagram as Backstory_mag. And I have a Facebook fan page for Jeff Goldsmith. I just don't use Facebook that much. I'll try and do a little more this year, but I'm actually hoping to do more Instagram. How about that? So you'll probably see more like sneak shots from inside the magazine on Instagram, but reach out to me. I'll do my best to respond. And look, I'm Jeff Goldsmith. I'm the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A. Thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.